On Air episode 2, and I'm here with Tom Grodek from Mentor Schools.
Oh,
And hey, how are you?
good. How are you?
Good. Why don't you give us a real quick introduction, and then we'll start talking.
My name's Tom Grodek. I was a math teacher for a long time in Mentor, and then I became an instructional coach earlier this year. And then right around Thanksgiving time, I became an assistant principal at Memorial Middle School. And we're introducing blended learning, and we're really excited to get that going. We're introducing it into our middle school. We have it in another middle school, and we're just really excited to get that going. And I can't wait to implement it with a bunch of the teachers there.
Awesome. Well, here I got one to start with. So you became a principal around Thanksgiving time.
Mhm.
What was that, and how was that? I mean, it had to have been a big move.
That was insane, and I had 24 hours to make the decision, which was very interesting. So I was sitting in a meeting with all the other instructional coaches. We had a working lunch every Friday, and I get a call from, or I get the assistant principal comes in and said, "Hey Tom, the head of HR wants to see you," and I'm like, "Oh no!" So my mental Rolodex goes, and I'm thinking, what tweets did I send out? What did I do that was stupid? And I walk in, and there's the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the head of HR, and my heart just about stopped. And they said, "Hey," and they laughed at me and said, "Oh, we love that reaction," and that was pretty funny. And they said, "This isn't a bad thing," and I'm like, "Oh, good." So there was a person had to retire, so there was some movement, and they asked me to fill in for the assistant superintendent or for the assistant principal at Memorial Middle School. And then since then, I've been offered the job full time, so or in a permanent way. So that's really exciting.
Right. That says a lot for what you did there in your first year.
Oh, thanks.
Um, what was just to kind of get us started, what is in your crawl right now? What's something that you're thinking a lot about now as summer hits and the tension of the school year is kind of wound down? What phase are you in now, and what's turning you on? What are you thinking about?
I'm reading Reign of Error by Diane Ravitch right now, and it's a really cool history of obviously she's against the education reformers like Bill and Melinda Gates and Arnie Duncan and Michelle Rhee. So it's a lot about the math behind right now. The chapter I'm in right now is the math behind why we're not actually failing in public education. I'm very strong public education supporter. I went through public schools. I've taught in a public school, and I want it to be the strongest it can be for my daughter when she gets to be school age, and for future generations, because I think that's where the best educators are. Obviously, I'm biased, but it's a lot about why we need to fix bigger things, such as poverty. So obviously, I mean that's a huge thing, but such as prenatal care for babies, and it's a lot about why are we focusing on trying to fix something. Everyone's calling it broken. It's broken. It's a crisis. But she uses some pretty convincing math, some pretty convincing studies to show that it's not broken. It's not a crisis, and it's just the privatization of what we're doing for profit. And this whole Pearson thing and the Common Core. It seems like we're doing it to fill the pockets of shareholders instead of doing what's right for kids, and that just kills me inside. And just seeing what OAAs have done throughout my career, there are teachers at our school that are unbelievable. We have really great teachers at Memorial. There are teachers at my school that are unbelievable who they do OAA boot camp, and it's just they do a really good job, and the kids really get into it, and their scores are through the roof. But it's sad that we have to do something like that. Why can't we do really cool projects? Why can't we do long-term, higher level thinking activities that can really enrich what we're doing instead of seeing these standards on the wall, which I know they're important to teach, but we have to teach them by a certain time frame, and okay, we didn't quite get that, but let's move on to the next one, and that kills me. And that's the culture that we've built as a country, and it's almost like it's fear-mongering of teachers to have to adhere to these tests, and especially with PARCC assessments coming up, I feel bad for the teachers, and I want to make it better. And I think as an administrator now, and then with the higher administration, giving the teachers the opportunity to fail, giving them the opportunity to get out of their comfort zone and saying, it's okay, try it. Just try it. If it works, great. If not, oh well. Do some professional rounds and show other teachers what's great about what you're doing. And I think opening the door for that and changing that mindset within our school is something I'm really passionate about. and I want to make sure teachers aren't afraid to take risks, to fail, to do any of that, because that's what is going to drive education forward. When they're not thinking about the tests anymore, obviously we have to teach the standards, but when they're thinking about other ways to engage students that isn't just to teach to the test, and I hate that term so much, but that's what No Child Left Behind did. That's what Race to the Top does even more. So that's been very frustrating for me, and I want to find a way in our building, in our little middle school, to show teachers that that's not the way it has to be. You can be better than that using what we have.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think. Whenever I hear the word boot camp associated with school, I get kind of skeeved out.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these terms that wind up encroaching on our discussions of education, like boot camp, right? So you do test taking boot camp. And then we have these business terms that also wind up in our speech about education. We talk about the bottom line. We talk about using our metrics and satisfying our core audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how far the pendulum has shifted towards a militaristic, not military. I mean, militaristic is those words come into it, right? A militaristic and business-laden education that kind of neglects the art of it and the wonder of it and the whole use of whim and whimsy in education. And I've seen some of the work you've done over, that was done at Ridge, and now that you're doing at Memorial, and I've been talking to, teachers in your district, and I can notice a change when I go between my district in Lakewood, or I was just in Parma. When I look at regional districts, it seems Mentor has something very unique going on. And I keep saying to you guys all the time, you're really leading the charge. So how are you going about getting us off this testing wheel? How are you inspiring teachers to kind of go beyond the measurements we already have? We were talking earlier off air about the new blog post I have about horsepower and how cars were measured in horsepower only so that they could be explained to people who understood horses who didn't understand cars. It was a metaphor. And it seems like the test scores that we're so much after are claiming to represent something, but every time I talk to good educators, we talk about teaching beyond teaching to the test. So what do you?
I think test score. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I have an answer, but all right. I think test scores at this point are autopsy reports. I mean, when you're talking about trying to assess students, they need to be throughout the lesson, or throughout the unit, to see where they're at on that particular standard or these groups of standards, and then take that information and move forward. Obviously, if you ask any rational educator or any passionate educator, that's what they do. But these high stakes ones are ones at the end of the year that can determine, in some districts, how much a teacher is paid, and it's scary as a teacher. And Mentor, I think the reason we're leading the charge, we got a new superintendent 2 years ago, and he's allowing us to think outside the box. He's putting that faith in the teachers, in the building administrators, to allow teachers to think differently and take chances. And there's not the emphasis put on testing and test results that are going to show up in the newspaper. And I think hopefully the unintended, or the consequences of this are going to be that through this blended learning, that students are going to learn how to problem solve, and they're going to learn how to think deeply, and they're going to be able to take that test and do a better job, even though we didn't think about that the whole year. We didn't think about the OAA or the OGT or whatever the PARCC assessment is the whole year. We thought about how we're going to problem solve, how we're going to work together, how we're going to do all this stuff, but the unintended consequence is that we're going to do great on the test no matter what. And as a teacher, I did a flip lesson, blended learning type thing, and my building principal was on board completely, and I did standards-based grading, even though I had to use points because we didn't really have that, and it was incredible. The students loved it, and I gave them every chance to correct what they were doing. And without my principal and superintendent's support, I don't know how many people have that opportunity. So it starts with allowing yourself to fail. And I love Rick Wormley saying, first attempt in learning. I mean, obviously, a lot of people say that, but I love quoting him. But just giving people that chance to fail and not be afraid to try the next new thing. And we have a lot of thinkers in our district, I think, that are that see the next big thing, and they're going after it, and they're presenting at different things. And we have a ton of people going to ISTE in a couple weeks, and we have people right now at the Marzano conference in Orlando, and that's from our leadership allowing us to go do those things and putting devices in our hands and redoing classrooms to have movable furniture and having you come to our district to show teachers, this is what I've done, what do you do, and have that open line of communication, and not be condescending about it, and not be this is what you need to do. It's not, nothing's prescribed. It's you need to figure out what's best for you, and then have conversations with other teachers and throughout the district, but then through Ohio Ed Chat or through Card Ed Chat or through anything like that, usually Twitter, have those great, rich conversations to advance your learning and your instruction, and I think that's huge. And getting that opportunity is enormous. And we started before this superintendent. We had a superintendent that didn't allow us on social media, so we weren't allowed on Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. And the first thing that Matt Miller did is he got on Twitter immediately, and he has a huge Twitter presence, and he got all of us on Twitter with hashtag once a card and hashtag card ed chat. And we do on Tuesday nights a Twitter chat. So it's awesome, and that's getting people talking and getting people excited about the next new thing. So I think that's very important.
You know, as I look at it, you know, and I've met Matt a few times, and I famously say we don't hang out together, but I think having a superintendent like that is something powerful. As I go around to different districts, like, it seems to be that districts that have either a powerful principal or a powerful superintendent who's connected in this way and who helps to create that culture are the districts that do the best. I guess one of the things I'm curious about is what got you hooked into this way of thinking. I'm sure, like me and like many of us, you didn't start out this way. You started out wanting to be a teacher probably because you were either good at school or you liked the subject. So what happened? Where did you go off the path?
I think it was when I was teaching middle school. When I was teaching middle school math, I was sitting there, and I did a good job. I think I did a pretty good job, but that's what it was. It was just pretty good, and it needed to be great. And I thought to myself, if I was a student in this class, would I really like this? Would I really enjoy this? Not that I have to put on a show or anything like that, but I wanted to make it richer. I wanted to make it stronger. And I hate seeing students in class that are sitting there disengaged or unengaged, however you want to say it, and they either completely get it so that they're bored and doodling or talking to their friends, or they don't get it at all and they're drowning and they don't want to say anything. I don't want to just aim for the middle 80% or the middle 60%. I want to hit everything. So I told my principal, I said, give me every student on an IEP so that I can have a co-teacher in here. And luckily I had a rock star co-teacher that was way better than me, and we had common planning, and we ate lunch together even, and we really planned this out, and we wanted to address the needs of every level of learner, and that opened up a huge window for me. And my principal said, Doug Baker, he's an awesome principal. I mean, he's been there for a dozen years, and he said, go do it. Don't be afraid to fail. I mean, he had complete faith in us, and it was great. And he put the tools in our hands to do it, in the sense that put a co-teacher in my classroom, and we had a completely symbiotic relationship that the students didn't know who was the math teacher and who was the intervention specialist, and that was pretty cool. So I think, and it took a lot of elbow grease and making a ton of videos online and things like that. But oh my gosh, hitting every single level of learner. At least we did 3 levels of learners, giving them formative assessments, and then testing them again, or giving them like a quick formative in the beginning, and then working based on their results. They would go in 1 of 3 groups. They would go in an enrichment group, or they'd go in a remediation group, or they would go in the middle group and just practice. And we would switch who did what every time, and it was really rich, and the kids loved it. And then we'd have an assessment that was standards based, so they would have to prove to us whether they explained it to us, or whether they did it on a test, or whether they did it in front of the class. You can see this student knows how to solve multi-step equations. Check. But then they have to prove it to us later too, that they still know how to do it. So I don't know. I think that the reason my mind changed is I looked around at my classroom, and I looked around at other classrooms and said, would I want to learn that way? If the answer is no, then something has to change. And I think as teachers, we have to constantly be learning and changing. We expect students to do it. We expect students to be learning constantly. Why aren't we expecting the same out of ourselves? So there's always something new and great and new techniques that you can see, and you have to humble yourself enough to say, wow, that's great. I should be doing that in my classroom. And seeing other teachers doing that and having that freedom to do it was huge.
Yeah, as I listened to your story, there's a couple things that really hit me. The fact that you had someone else in the room to partner up with, right? Someone in the room who in a way you could teach in front of, and they could teach in front of you, and you guys could bounce the ideas back and forth. That seems to be a key ingredient in your story. I think there's this idea of working with the special ed kids. I've heard this a lot, and I know it's true in my own experience, that I wanted to hit every kid. I just, kind of going back to what you said about public school. I'm a public school nut. I believe in what Dewey said, that if we're going to have a public education, it should be for all our kids. And by targeting those kids who are considered special ed, working with that extra teacher, you start to open up multiple ways of assessing, right? You started doing some universal design for learning kind of things, where you're giving kids multiple avenues to report out to you. You're differentiating within the groups, you're switching that up. All those things seem to be really good launching pads for changing the way you think about education. I mean, for me, it was instant messaging on Moodle. I'd maybe been using Moodle for 2 days. I had taken a class with Ken Kozar. Ken Kozar taught it. I took the class with him. And I think after the first lesson, I was like, okay, I'm going into my classroom. I'm starting this tomorrow. I'm really into this. And I'll never forget the first assignment I gave was just kind of like say hello. And I quickly realized I was hearing from every kid. I realized that when I asked everyone to write down their homework and hand it in, I would get about an 85% turn-in rate. But via instant messaging and via online forums, I was hearing from every kid. And most interestingly, I started to hear the most from the quietest kids, the kids who I normally wouldn't talk to in a classroom. Maybe it was my, as a lecture style, maybe it was they were shy, maybe it was after lunch and they were tired. But all of a sudden, I called them silent giants. Like these silent giants arose, and they made me confront what the technology was enabling me to do. Like, oh my God, I now hear the voice of Sarah in the back who never says anything. And she's talking now, and she's writing now. And so how do I engage Sarah? Because clearly in class doesn't work. In class isn't where it is. And when I found that out, when that dawned on me that, oh my God, I can hear from every kid, I immediately went online and just started like looking for more things to engage kids that didn't require this delivery method that seemed to shut out about 60 or 40 or 30% of the kids on any given day. So I think it's interesting. The thing that pulls us into where we are now, or the thing that makes you change paradigm, is almost always a moment of crisis or utter realization. My moment of crisis was, oh my God, every kid can talk. What do I say back to them? And I can't possibly comment on all of this. What do I do now?
And I think the best is when students comment on each other too. That's what's really rich, I think, is when you hear that, when you see a student posting something, whether you use Schoology or Edmodo or Moodle, and you see a student that never raises their hand in class, like you were saying, sits in the back, those silent giants, and then you see other students commenting back to them. And in math, it was, hey, I didn't know how to do number 3. How do you do that? How do you what can someone explain slope to me? And then you'd see all these responses from students across the grade. It's really rich starting that conversation.
The big difference that you did there that's so key is that as a teacher, you removed yourself out of the sole ownership of the knowledge, right? You were no longer, and it happened very naturally because the medium changed, right? In the classroom is very defined. You're the teacher because you're the guy in the front with the big desk. We have the little desks. But when I'm online in a forum, the only thing that indicates to me really the power that you're the teacher and I'm the student is you might put a Mr. in front of your name. Other than that, kids begin to comment on kids' work, and if you as the teacher just allow it to happen, right? You don't even have to encourage it. You definitely don't have to assign it. You just let kids begin to think in a community. They begin to use each other as resources, and I think we're foolish in education not to foster that to the upteenth end.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's the ego of the teacher almost getting in the way, saying, no, they have to get it from me. They have to get it from me. Why do they have to get it from you? There are students in this class that probably are better at explaining to that particular student or that group of students. Why not put that knowledge in their hands, and why not allow them to investigate that themselves? And I was really, if I wasn't going to be an instructional coach or assistant principal this year, I was really excited about using like Show Me or Nomia or Teach by Nomia, some type of app where students could create like a virtual textbook where they could explain things. I thought that would have been really cool to build that library so they could hear from each other and not just from me. And I think something along those lines is so relevant to them immediately. And hearing that feedback from each other, it could be a student that absolutely can't stand me, and obviously there are going to be students that don't like the teacher, don't like any teachers, but they might like the kid next to him, or they might look up to the kid next to him, and if that kid can explain it to him, hey, they learned that the job of instruction is to ensure learning. I love that quote. Jim Connell, one of my former teachers, said that the job of an instructor is to ensure learning. How do we ensure learning? Well, it could be it could be it could be a conversation between you and a student. It could be students presenting to each other. It could be some type of investigative project that they do, or some type of collaboration. It doesn't matter what it looks like as long as it gets the point across and you can ensure that they learn the material. So
I've got an interesting one for you. I think you and your wife's a teacher as well, right?
She was, yeah. Now she stays at home with my daughter.
Right. So what was that like? Because I just think it's a unique thing that you and I can talk about. We're both married to educators, and how do you think that works? How well do you do that? You know, I think there are a lot of teachers who are married to educators, and I just think it's a unique kind of right turn for us to take and say, how does that work at home? How does that work in professional life? How do you deal with that?
Well, my wife worked at the business office, so she wasn't necessarily in the classroom, but she knew the business side of education, and it was intense because we both knew how hard everyone worked, and nobody else sees that, and we're kind of in our own cultural bubble, and you kind of build each other up, which is really nice because you both know how hard the other one's working, so you kind of cut each other more slack, which is nice. And you groan when like someone brings home a stack of tests to grade or things like that. Or you get each other so much more. And then what I've noticed, I don't know about you, but you hang out with other teachers and other couples that are teachers, and you can kind of commiserate and really help each other and build on each other, and that helps. That helps get you through the grind, because it is a grind. And that's and other people just don't get it. If you're not a teacher, you're not married to a teacher, you just don't get how tough it is. And not to say that we're so great, but it really is a grind when you have to perform. You are performing 5 or 6 times a day for 45 minutes to an hour, and it's hard. And it's not like you can stick your head on your desk and if you're having a bad day, you can't have a bad day in front of kids. I mean, you do, but they notice immediately, and you can't come into work and bring everything from your home life and lay it all on them. I mean, sometimes you do, but you have to kind of put that really tough stuff away and start teaching. Because you have to be there. You have to show up for kids, and that's an awesome power that you get as an educator that nobody else gets. That you have to stand up in front of those kids and make sure that they're learning. And I can't think of anywhere else where you can get 25 to 30 middle school kids or high school kids in a classroom and they're learning, like they're doing something productive and learning, and not. I mean, if you see them at the mall, they're all over the place. But I mean, getting them in a room and getting them to collaborate or getting them to learn is so powerful and awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like alchemy. When you know it when you see it, you know it when you can create it. But to go back, like, what are the pieces and parts? It's nearly impossible. I find that it's nice to come home and not have to explain the circumstances of whatever conversation we have about work that day. It's nice to not have to provide all the context, and that the context, we can go right to the shorthand. And super helpful to do that. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting because I know that Jeremy Bruick is in this very similar situation. So I was wondering that. Got the dog going.
What's cool is you can bounce ideas off them too. Like, does this work? What do you think? Like, if you have a new idea, just a quick soundboard. Like, do you think this works? And they could say, I don't know if that tweak it this way or whatever. And that's a really nice thing too.
We just did 2 days of conversation on the most recent blog post I did. Like I kept running it by my wife, going, "Does this make sense to you? Is this okay?" You know, and it was really good. I want to ask, where do you get inspiration about education from outside of education? Where do you see the things that kind of cross over into your world?
I like to look. I have a niece and nephew that are 8 and 6, and then my daughter's 18 months old. And I kind of look at what inspires them. What if you can get those little tornadoes to stop and think about something and learn about something? How do they learn? Because I don't see them in class. I see them all around the house or in the backyard or playing with bugs or whatever it is. What gets them to tick? And it's discovery. You know, it's just I want to figure out what makes that go. And it's that. And it's something physical that they're doing. They're not learning out of a textbook. They're learning by smashing these two rocks together, you know. So I love watching how people figure stuff out, especially little kids, because they're just so curious and they're so imaginative, and they take things that, like, my daughter's 18 months old, and I don't think we have all these toys for her, and she never wants to play with toys. She wants to play with my glasses, or she wants to play with a cup, and she wants to, like, she talks into it like Darth Vader. It's like, that's not what the cup is for, but you know, it's so fun to watch them take things that aren't necessarily what they're meant for and do something cool with them. And as an adult, I wouldn't have thought of that, or a 7th grader wouldn't think of that. But to see those little kids, their minds work, that's where I get a lot of inspiration, and just seeing their gears turn, and they do things until they're hurt. I mean, my daughter will watching a kid learn to walk is incredible. And just seeing her scrape her knees and oh my gosh, and it's tough to watch, but they learn, and it's really incredible. And that's what we need kids to do. We need that imagination. We need that fun. Like Sir Ken Robinson said, we're testing all this fun out of school, and it's unfortunate. We need kids to want to dance, and we need kids to want to sing and make art and do really great things. But when they're sitting in the classroom learning about 85 standards that they're going to be tested on in April, it kills them. I mean, and it kills that inspiration. So I love to just see people learn like that. What about you? Where do you see that outside of school?
You know, I do a lot of. I think I get a lot from art. I really like to. I really like to listen to music. I really like visual things. I'm on boingboing.net. You know, it's my favorite website, and it's just this ephemera. There's something about the way that art is a reflection of the world, and the way that it's a way of processing angst, and it's a way of processing wonder. It's Emerson called it a transmuting process, where you take experience and you make it into truth. And I know that as I see art develop over the last 10 years, graffiti art especially, I see a lot of the application of that attitude in what we do in school. You know, I see a lot of hip-hop in the way I approach education. And there's some kind of like outlaw artist spirit that I'm really drawn to that has nothing to do with education other than when I put my educator hat on, when I'm inside that bubble. I learn so much about the way we deal with things, the way we talk about what we do, and the way we represent the things that happen to us. You know, I think the whole, like Teaching Humans as a blog, for example. It's funny that when I think of Teaching Humans as a blog, I think of it very differently than Teaching Humans as a Twitter handle. And I see it almost in the way that a graffiti artist would paint a train differently than they would paint a canvas. For me, the Teaching Humans voice on Twitter is very Orwellian. I want it to be almost making announcements all the time. And then with the blog, I want it to be more questioning, more of a conversation, or more of a, these are things I can't get out of my head, so let me throw them out to you because I'm doing a blog as a reflection. And that feels to me a lot like subway painting, where I just, you know, throw it up here and just it goes where it goes, and people take it where they take it. Uh, so I would say the art world is a place outside of education that I look a lot. In sports, I mean, there's always like sports metaphors are great. I'm watching the World Cup, and I see a lot in that that's interesting too.
What's great about sports is it's a meritocracy completely. I mean, you're earning it. That's it. If you're good, you're going to go. If not, you're not. And I like the outlaw mentality. That's so cool. I love all the different creative things students do in their downtime in between classes, or when you're on a field trip and they're on the bus and they're just trying to entertain themselves. That's where some of the coolest stuff comes from, where they create a game or they create a song or they film a stupid Vine or something, and it's super creative, and you're thinking, I would never do this in class. I would never have my students do this, but they create this incredible thing in those couple minutes, and they all get in on it. Nobody told them to do that. Nobody set them up to do that. They just did it. And we need to create more opportunities like that in education. I love that concept of being the outlaw artist.
As a teacher, I always think if I can find out what you like, I can teach you anything. Like, I just need to find out what you like. You could be into skateboarding, and I'm ready to go. Like, I can line up my metaphors. I can do everything I need to do to make sure that. And how much time do we spend getting to know what our kids like, what our students like, what the people, even the people that we work with as coworkers, what do they like? I always like to spend the first, people always talk about the first day of classes when you learn names, and I always like to spend like the first week and a half doing that. Where if it's going to be about the pace and getting to the end of the book and everything like that, I like to just give up the race before that starts and just, sit around in the starting gate, getting to know the people you're lining the blocks with. Because I think it accelerates what we can teach somebody if we can get an insight into what they love and the thing that drives them in their spare time. Like the kid who makes the funny vines. That can go a lot of places within the context of a classroom once we know that a kid can do that. But usually we tell kids to not, you're in school, you should be thinking school things, not things that you're passionate about.
And I think that the relationship piece is so huge for an educator. That week and a half, I mean, that's you build those in August and they'll pay off in March, April, May. And that when students care about you as a person and when you care about them and they care about each other, they're going to work so much harder and you're going to work so much harder because you don't want to let them down. I always felt before I stopped teaching, and I still feel like this. If I'm not spending every second in that classroom doing something positive, whether it's building relationships or whether it's showing them some new way to do something or just teaching, I feel like I'm robbing them of that time. And I owe it to them to put all my heart and soul into that because I cared about them. I cared about them as individual people. And I think we need to put more thought into that. They're not cogs in a wheel. It's not, and education now seems to be, by reformers, seems to be treated like a business. It's not a business. These aren't clients. These aren't customers. They're real life, living and breathing, blood and guts kids that we care about, and they care about us. And when you build that when they build that with each other and they build that with you, it goes such a long way. And group projects and conversations are so much richer when they trust each other and they trust that they're not going to, make fun of each other and they're going to value each other's opinions and value yours. So I think that building relationships thing and knowing something about them is enormous.
Well, you know what? We're here at the 40-minute mark. Why don't we call it a day? I think this has been awesome. And today when we were talking about doing this, I just thought this is going to be a good conversation because I really look at what you're doing as what a lot of people should be doing. What I wish was being done around me more. And I think you're incredibly fortunate to be a part of it, and I also think you're really doing it with the right intention. It's about kids for you. It's about the people you're working with and the relationships you have. I don't know. I'm just really, really happy that you joined us today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to see where you're going with Teaching Humans, and taking the sabbatical is going to be very cool for education around here because you'll have the time to do this awesome stuff and have great conversations with people from all over. So I'm very excited for that.
All right, thanks.